You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to ask question under my name in today's order paper, 10 of 2021, directed at the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Economy, Civil Service and Communications. And the question is, can the Minister provide an update to Parliament on the status of government finance, especially on revenue, to date? Before I take my seat, Honorable Speaker, sir, I spoken with the Honorable Attorney General on this issue because he made a very detailed ministerial statement this morning, sir. So I'm just kind of throwing this in because I'm just focusing on the revenue. That's all, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Economy, Civil Service, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I'd like to thank the Leader of Opposition for acknowledging the discussion we did have. Unfortunately, the response by his rep was not as comprehensive as we thought it would be, who spoke on the ministerial statement. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to take this opportunity to just reiterate what I had said earlier on, and that is to again highlight, because there was quite a lot of statistics thrown around this morning, the government's total revenue collection for the 6 months stood at $964.8 million, while total expenditure amounted to $1.5 billion. What is really important, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that the total revenue for the past 6 months, Mr. Speaker, sir, was above the forecast of $107.3 million, or 12.5%. So we are above what we had actually forecasted. Now, this is attributed, Mr. Speaker, sir, to two sources. One is, of course, revenue comes from tax sources and what we call non-tax sources. So the tax revenue were above forecast by $26.7 million. Above, but of course not by a huge margin. It's $26.7 million, or 3.6%. However, non-tax revenues exceeded estimated collections by $80.6 million. These, of course, Mr. Speaker, sir, have come by way of grants that we have received. Some, of course, are fees, etc., but, in this kind of climate, you don't expect that much increase in fees. And the number of sources from the non-tax revenues have been from, as I mentioned earlier on this morning, from organizations like ADB, Australia, Indonesia, and the European Union. A lot of it is to do with the COVID-19 emergency response, TCIASA, the Resilience Budget Support Program by Australia, the Welfare Support Program by Australia. Indonesia contributed USD $1.48 million for PBS, and of course the EDF funding from the European Union. Mr. Speaker, sir, I don't have really much to say to Honourable Nawaikula's response because he did not really say much, but apart from, of course, personalising things. But Honourable Prasad, unfortunately, is not here, and I wanted to just take this opportunity to respond to what he said. One of the issues he did raise was about increasing consumption, and that is precisely what the budget is all about. When we reduce tariffs, the idea is to increase also consumption, giving people access to goods and services to some extent, depending what it is, the ability to access those services. I remember just a few years ago, we were condemned by NFP for having what they call a consumption-led growth. And they said we should only have investment-led growth. Of course, we have said it should be both. And in this point in time, of course, consumption can also be held back because of the psychology of where we are at. People tend to invest when they feel a lot more comfortable, when they feel a lot more confident with the system or what's happening within the system. So if tomorrow, for example, Australia decides that they will allow Australians to come and holiday in Fiji in the Bulla bubble and can go back to Australia without doing quarantine upon their return, because we're a COVID-contained country, you can imagine that good news will lead to enormous confidence. People will want to then start perhaps fast-tracking their investments. The shopkeepers will perhaps start importing more goods. People selling white goods will start importing that. So it has a spiraling and positive effect. And that's precisely what we're doing. He used the example, and I wish he was here, he used the example that, why did we, for example, the person who can now buy a bigger car, who can afford it in the first place? Well, the reason is because if you make it a bit more affordable, that person will be willing to depart with that money. When they depart with that money and buy that car that perhaps they would not have bought otherwise, they pay VAT on it. We collect the VAT. When they sell more cars, the car dealer then has more salespeople. They need more mechanics. So consumption from that perspective creates a lot more robustness within the economy. And that's precisely the reason why we have done that, to for example, therefore just say, well, the rich guy can buy the car in any case. It's a very simplified way of viewing things. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you. Honourable Moikula, you have the floor.
The revenue that we are currently collecting, is that enough to finance government